President Trump announces that today is Liberation Day in Washington, D.C. If you remember the last time Trump talked about Liberation Day, it was when he was talking about levying tariffs over virtually the entire world. That didn't work out too well. This one likely isn't going to work out that well either. And the particular focus of this one is where Trump has said, hey, there's been this huge spike in violent crime in Washington, D.C., as exemplified by recently a former DOJ employee who was allegedly beaten up while trying to stop a carjacking. That's prompted Trump to talk about how he's going to take control back of Washington, D.C. Now, certainly on the surface of it, who wouldn't want law and order in a place? And I live right outside of Washington, D.C. I know for sure how violent it is. I see the crime stats all the time. I see reports about things that happen to people. Even some congressional staffers have been murdered. I mean, it's not, nobody's immune to there. And of course, the further you get in there, and I've had some friends that live deeper inside of Washington, and they do talk about, they're very concerned about it. But the question is this the right method? What is the best way to improve crime? And in fact, has there been a spike in crime? Or, as the evidence actually shows, was there already a 2-year reduction in a dropping in some of the violent crimes, meaning that they were trending in the right direction, though without any question, Washington, D.C. is still one of the violent city and one of the more violent cities in America. So it's not without any substance. There certainly is some. But there are other factors that have to be weighed into. Here's how Trump put it I don't know, a couple of hours ago when he announced it.
I'm announcing a historic action to rescue our nation's capital from crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor, and worse. This is Liberation Day in D.C., and we're going to take our capital back. We're taking it back. Under the authorities vested in me as the President of the United States, I'm officially invoking Section 740 of the District of Columbia Home Rule Act. You know what that is? And placing the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department under direct federal control, and you'll be meeting the people that will be directly involved with that. Very good people, but they're tough, and they know what's happening, and they've done it before. In addition, I'm deploying the National Guard to help reestablish law, order, and public safety in Washington, D.C., and they're going to be allowed to do their job properly.
Okay, now that's where you're starting to get into the area that concerns me. This, by all accounts, this whole operation and action here was spurred by this former DOJ employee that was, I don't know, a week or 10 days ago, I can't remember the date, was allegedly beaten up by trying to stop some carjacking. Carjacking is a huge problem in D.C. No question about it. That's totally legit, and all the claims of the president are independently confirmed. I think he said it's triple. It's up triple since 2018. And so it's genuinely a big issue. But what is the best way to go after it? This reliance on the military, this is one of the bigger troubling components of this. The president seems to be relying more and more on the military means, whether you're talking internationally or nationally, to solve problems. Of course, we use the military arm in Iran to allegedly get rid of a nuclear weapons program that our own intelligence sources said wasn't there. But that's what he wanted to do, so he used it for that. They used the military means to try to get the Houthis to stop interdicting activities in the Red Sea. We did that for a while until it got bored, until we saw it wasn't going to work, and then we stopped doing that. We've sent the military certainly down to the border to try and stop the illegal crossers. That has had some some efficacy. So that has actually helped solve a lot of that problem. There's now nearly no illegal border crossings, or at least that's what the official words are. So that part seems to be good. But then we also sent military into Los Angeles. And then now here the president's going to federalize the National Guard in D.C., where he is, by statute, the commander-in-chief of the D.C. National Guard. He's going to federalize them, 800, as he said right there. Every time you take another step down the road of using military or coercion force to solve your problems, almost always this has a negative reaction. Now, I'm for law and order, and the inherent and the job of law and order means you have to be able to use appropriate levels of violence to bring those who are lawbreakers, especially violent lawbreakers, under control, and to keep the streets safe for the law-abiding citizens. That is the job of the government, whether it's the federal government or the DC government, state, federal, local, etc. That's what they're supposed to do. But you have to do it at a place where it preserves the civil population and peace throughout. But if you go in with this big heavy hand and think you're just going to show everybody who's tough, and you go in with armed force, and by the way, same thing we're talking about doing against the cartels in Mexico or other South American countries. We keep seeing a problem and we keep thinking, hey, let's use this big hammer to go after it. That's cool. A hammer's great. We'll just smash every problem. But it almost never works out that way. Remember, we just on this Mexico issue, we had this whole war on drugs for well over a decade, and it was a complete abysmal failure. Everything we tried to do just backfired. That's not how you solve that problem. We tried to use force in Afghanistan for 20 years. I was personally part of it. I saw it. We keep thinking, let's use more force. Bush did it. He kept going more and more force. Every year when the violence rose, he used more force. And then that had the natural reaction that it caused violence to spike, because the other side's not going to be passive. They're not going to be cowed. They're going to bowl up. And so then we would try more. And then Obama did the same way through until we had that big surge. And then we just ended up leaving. And then finally we said, all right, we're bored with this too. So we just left. And then we completely lost. And the same situation in Iraq, although we did for a period of time see a significant drop in violence, yet our troops are still there to this day. Its troops are still in Syria to this day. Everywhere you keep trying this, it seems to not produce what we claim it's supposed to produce. And even in this situation with Iran, some say, oh, well, he obliterated the Iranian nuclear program. There's a lot of debate about whether that was the case or not. You've seen Professor Ted Postel say evidence suggests that they probably still do have it, and may even be able to now covertly move to a bomb, and we wouldn't even know about it until it actually happens. But in any case, nothing has been solved. We went in there, bombed a lot of stuff. The Israelis bombed a lot of stuff for 12 days, and then everybody just stopped. Nothing was solved. None of the conditions were addressed. Same thing with the Houthis. We bombed them for a while. We just stopped. None of that has been solved. The situation still remains tense to this day. And now we're talking about going in with military force into DC. And you got to understand how this works, how law enforcement even works. He's claiming that this is similar to the border enforcement. I mentioned that's one area where you can say there's room for hey, using the military there actually succeeded on the border. It was probably a whole host of things. It wasn't just the military, but that was a part of it. But he said, yeah, we did this on the border. Everybody said it couldn't be done. We did it. We're going to do the same thing here. Okay, you need to understand something. It is radically different to say we're going to secure a line on the dirt where the border is. We're going to secure that and prevent people from crossing illegal. That's a relatively, comparatively, it's easy because you can clear fields of fire. You can have visibility over large sections of it, whether that's through cameras or whether through outposts, et cetera. And somebody gets on there, you see them, you go get them. It's not that hard. You make sure that the defenses are as good as they can be, and you watch some of the weak points, et cetera. That's a relatively straightforward military prospect. You talk about sending the military into a major city that is teeming with people, and some of them are lawbreakers, some of them are law abiders. It's very similar to the dynamic in an insurgency. Just walking down I did this many times, just walking through Afghan villages or Iraqi villages. I did both. You just see people. You have no idea who anybody is. The same thing would happen there for the National Guard. Now, unless they're just going to be hanging out in bunkers, and then when there's a crime, instead of calling the police, you're going to call the National Guard, and they're going to come respond to it. The National Guard is not going to prevent crime. Just having them walk around and do presence patrols and show military power on there, they're not going to know. They're going to walk by. They're going to see some guys that he looks like a criminal. But he may just be an angry man. He may not like the fact that there's armed forces from his own country patrolling his city street. But he may not be a violent crime. He may not have committed any crimes at all. But now then, you don't know, because it could also be a guy who just an hour ago carjacked a vehicle. It's impossible to tell. So what do you think? 800 in a city as big as Washington, D.C., that's a drop in the bucket. It's not going to do anything at all. it plays well on the TV because it sounds good. I'm sure there'll be some video of guys out patrolling or doing whatever it is the orders are going to be. This just happened, so we don't know any of those details yet. But if you think that this is going to solve crime, then somebody doesn't seem to have a good understanding of how crime is solved. One of the other things Trump says there is, in addition to Liberation Day, he said this is the cause and the reason why we're doing this is because of a big spike in violence, which is all because of the city's Democratic leaders.
The abject failures of the city's local leadership, the radical left city council adopted no cash bail. By the way, every place in the country where you have no cash bail is a disaster. That's what started the problem in New York, and they don't change it.
Okay, has it been an abject failure on the civilian leadership? Because the implication is that they've been doing nothing and that there's this huge spike in crime. I think you said several times here. But when you look at the actual information, now this is the Washington Post. This is from December 31st, 2024. So just right before President Trump took over. Violent crime, including homicide and carjackings, drops in Washington, D.C. And then you come down there and you see documented killings and shootings. Each were down roughly 30%. 30% in 1 year, district data shows, as part of an across the board drop in crime categories. Now, there still is crime, and there's no question about it. The civilian leadership, they certainly understand that. They keep talking about it, but and they're trying to do something. But you see by the numbers, and I think it was about a 20-something% drop the previous 12 months. So there was a huge spike in 2023 following the pandemic for various reasons. I don't understand all what it came, but there was a big spike across the board. So the civilian leadership and the Metropolitan Police decided, hey, let's do whatever we can to actually bring this stuff down. And they did. They succeeded. 20% in 1 year, almost 30% in the last calendar year. And in fact, let's go ahead and play this here. Here is the Muriel Bowser, the mayor of Washington, talking about, hey, we've been having some success here.
We are not experiencing a spike in crime. In fact, we're watching our crime numbers go down. In fact, the July before this very unfortunate incident with this young man occurred that seems to spurred all of this action, we had one of the lowest crime levels and shootings that we've had in a July in recent history.
And so what are you to make of that? Yeah, President Trump saying, no, there's this big spike. You have independent data that says not only has there not been a big spike, there's been a big decrease, a meaningful decrease, 20 and 30% in 2 consecutive years. The mayor there talked about how this past July was one of the lowest they've had, which means the trend apparently is continuing in a downward case. It's still high. It exists, but it is coming down, meaning they're having some success. So to sit there and blame the civilian leadership as though they're doing nothing when they are tangibly improving the situation, and now you're going to send in military, that's a problem. That's a big red flag. Now, Trump, just like when he didn't get the economic numbers that he wanted a week or two ago in the job report, and he said, oh, numbers are fake, so we fired the person that did it. He just said, no, I don't believe it, so they don't exist, and just trust me, don't look at the numbers. We're going to fire anybody who says otherwise. He's saying the same thing about this too. He's saying, no, actually, those numbers are not true. They actually aren't going down. I don't know what he's basing it on. He may have, as I recall, he said something about had some whistleblower. I can't talk about the validity of that yet, but let's just say I'm skeptical, because every time numbers don't match what he wants it to be, somebody gets fired, or he just ignores them, or just claims otherwise. But even if it wasn't actually happening, even if the numbers were exaggerated, I don't know, trying to solve the problem with this is not going to work. Now, imagine if you are the police department and the civil leadership within the District of Columbia. You're doing everything you can to try and bring this down. Some people like your policies, some people don't like them. Fair enough. That's part of a democracy. That's what elections are for. You hire people that you think they're going to do the job that you want them to. If they don't do it, you can fire them and hire somebody in the next election. That's how it works. You don't have to like everything. In fact, you're not going to. Nobody ever does. But that's how democracy works. That's how our government has worked up to this point. But now we have President Trump saying, no, I like the military stuff, and he's been using military force all over the place internationally and now increasingly domestically. And we're going to see this big heavy hand here. Here is newly appointed district attorney for D.C., Jeanine Pirro, who, of course, is a very strong advocate and supporter of Donald Trump, using the same tough language.
I see too much violent crime being committed by young punks who think that they can get together in gangs and crews and beat the hell out of you or anyone else. They don't care where they are. They can be in DuPont Circle, but they know that we can't touch them. Why? Because the laws are weak. I can't touch you if you're 14, 15, 16, 17 years old and you have a gun. I convict someone of shooting another person with an illegal gun on a public bus in the chest, intent to kill. I convict him. And you know what the judge gives him? Probation. Says you should go to college. We need to go after the DC Council and their absurd laws. We need to get rid of this concept of no cash bail, because the president is going to do everything we need to do to make sure that these emboldened criminals understand we see you, we're watching you, and we're going to change the law to catch you.
If I can just say the obvious out loud, changing the law isn't going to make you catch anybody. Once you get them onto trial, then that could help out, because if the law itself is written in such a week that that's happening, and I don't know if that's just an isolated example, if it's true or if it's common, I have no idea. But just changing the law isn't going to help you catch anybody. That's not going to help make anybody more law abiding. That's just not how it's going to work. It never has worked that way. And when you go in there talking real tough, like you're going to go and get all these guys, I know the hope is that this is going to scare them. That this is going to frighten them into saying, oh my gosh, well, there's a new sheriff in town. And now then there's somebody who's going to come in and is going to be a lot more forceful. So we better start abiding. Then you don't understand how the criminal mind works. If anything, that's probably going to make them do more. And if history is any guide, when we've seen people try to solve crime by having a bigger, heavier hand, it almost always, it's like putting more fire on a fuel. I've seen it in military experiences. I've seen it happen in civilian cities when people have tried to solve crime by bringing in more violence. It just rarely works that way. There's no one way to fix it. Let me be clear on this. It's not like that I'm not for any kind of strong police force in there. I think you have to have one. You better have a well-trained police force that knows what it's doing, knows what the law is, knows what not to cross. And sometimes you got to let some people blow off steam legally. But if they cross the line and break the law, then by all means, I am 100% unequivocally, yes, arrest the lawbreaker, hold them accountable, let the court system do its job, make sure that the laws are right. I'm in agreement with all that. Where I have some concerns, and right now it's just my concerns, we'll see how it's going to work out. But my concern is, and I've seen some of the comments in the chat already, my concern is that we're going too much on the military. We're going too much on the violence against violence and not doing anything else. We're accusing the liberal politicians of being too soft on crime, of being too soft, although it was having some demonstrable effect. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Whatever they were doing that was right, keep doing that. Do more of it. And if there was something they were doing that wasn't working, then great. But here's the problem with how this is being done. This is being done so fast, and it's so much focus on the violent part of it. It almost surely has not been thought through. This is very similar to what happened when the administration came in and they wanted to reduce the size of the federal government. Then they brought in Doge and they brought in Elon Musk and all these guys, and they're going to start slashing stuff and saving money. All they did, and I saw this from the inside because I know a number of government workers, they came in with what was bragged about as a chainsaw, but when you need a scalpel. And what they should have done is said, all right, we're going to study this situation in detail. We're going to do it in an accelerated form. Maybe spend 6 full months just analyzing the situation, deploying a whole group of really smart people in each one of these categories, each one of the cabinet level areas, and saying, all right, what's working, what's not, where's redundancy, what can we get rid of, what is the effect of it, and then start putting into an action plan. Taking care of the people and taking care of the population, it's enlarging the taxpayers by not letting money go to something that's not needed. That's what you should have done. Instead, what they did is they go in with this chainsaw first and start slashing stuff left and right, firing people all over the place, thousands of whom they had to later bring back because they realized, oh, wait, we actually need that, because no thought was given to it. And instead, it caused complete chaos. And the government is still suffering to this day because people are trying to figure out what's left now and how's the new organization going to work, because no one thought it through. This has every vibe that it's the same way, that it hasn't been thought through, that they haven't put any kind of really strategies behind it, and they don't seem to be working cooperatively with the existing law enforcement or government officials. And in fact, they're setting up a very antagonistic relationship before it even starts. Trump made a comment elsewhere in there that Pam Bondi would now be the commander of the Metropolitan Police Department. What do you think the chances are that the Metropolitan Police Department is going to feel like that they've been lost in the wilderness, but now thanks to here comes this federal person here, Pam Bondi, she's going to save the day, and now we're all going to listen to what she's going to say, which she has no earthly idea how to run a police department. She's never run a police department before, much less one the size of this with the complexity of what's going on here when there are people who've been doing the job in here. So it's not likely they're going to get along. And in fact, the Mayor Browser also said, look, we've been working with the federal authorities for a long time already.
It is always the president's prerogative to use federal law enforcement or the National Guard even. You know, I've talked on your show before that the D.C. National Guard is the president's National Guard. Right. So that's always his prerogative. And federal law enforcement is always on the street in D.C., and we always work cooperatively with them.
Now, though, you're going to put that cooperation at risk, especially if these people come in heavy-handed and start telling the local people who've lived there, many of them their whole lives, or certainly a lot of their career, and have intimate knowledge about the difficulties and the complexities of what's going on here. And you have somebody else coming in now from the outside and just start telling them how simple it is. It's going to be fixed because Trump said that. This is not even hard. This is simple. We're going to fix this. And and then, by the way, we're going to move on to other cities. We're going to take this same sample here and we're going to move on to other cities. Hence my worry that you're looking to militarize police functions and you're making it normalized to have military people on the streets doing police functions in the United States when he said this.
We have other cities that are very bad. New York has a problem. And then you have, of course, Baltimore and Oakland. We don't even mention that anymore. They're so far gone. We're not going to let it happen. We're not going to lose our cities over this. And this will go further. We're starting very strongly with D.C., and we're going to clean it up real quick, very quickly, as they say.
Oh, yeah, very quickly. We're going to take a situation that's been vexing governments for decades, and bam, we're going to pick it because we're going to bring in the National Guard and get tough. One of the other things that worries me about this, especially with the use of the military, what are the rules of engagement? Is it just, do they have to follow the same thing that a police department has to follow? Because Trump implied that they don't. In fact, in this clip we have here, he's describing a situation, and at the first of this clip, you'll see where some of the police department, was some like when they're doing riot control or something like that, they have instructions not to exacerbate a situation worse than if they're, being yelled at or spit upon, that they hold their line, et cetera, and they don't turn something that's bad into a worse situation. Trump, on the other hand, says, yeah, forget that. Let's go in hard and heavy.
And they're not going to be fighting back long because I've instructed them and told them whatever happens, they love to spit in the face of the police as the police are standing up there in uniform. They're standing and they're screaming at them an inch away from their face. And then they start spitting in their face. And I said, you tell them, you spit and we hit. And they can hit real hard. It's a disgusting thing. I've watched that for years, for 3-4 years. I've watched them. The police are standing, and they're told, don't do anything under any such, so and you can see they want to get at it. And they're standing there, and people are spitting in their face, and they're not allowed to do anything. But now they are allowed to do whatever the hell they want.
Yeah, whatever the hell they want. That's the wrong answer. You talk to any police expert, you can take a bad situation and explode it. Who wants to be spit in their face? Nobody. Everybody wants to be able to go. But you turn a situation like that and you give them authority to say, hey, if they scream in your face or if they spit on you, now then you can start pummeling them and taking care of them. And now then you're talking about violence is spreading out, and then you're likely to get even more. And if those are actually uniformed personnel, now you've got the specter of the potential that you are going to send American troops, National Guard troops that are dressed in military uniforms, to go and start doing policing functions. And then all of a sudden, now then you've got uniformed members shooting and killing in an explosive riot situation, which is all too easy to happen in the example that he just painted there. And how's that going to play? Well, now you have Americans killing Americans, American military, who everybody always holds up on this high pedestal. And now you're going to have video of them actually attacking citizens because they said something they didn't like, because they yelled in their face. There's a reason why that's a common police tactic, is to have discipline and to be able to take a lot of stuff in order to protect the population. If it's just words and verbal stuff, then okay. If it's against the law to spit on there, take them into custody. But don't now, we're going to hit you, and now we're going to hit you back, and we're going to go a lot worse, etc. I know this is a fluid situation here. I know there's pros and cons to a lot of this stuff, but my overall concern is that this is just militarizing the police function, and it's normalizing it. It's already went to the border. It's gone to LA. Now it's coming to Washington, D.C., and you heard him talk about maybe Baltimore, maybe New York. Where is this going to end? And if it so-called succeeds, then you're going to see that there's going to be this concern that, hey, or this temptation, let's keep doing it even more. Let's put more police out or more military out in more different places. And now all of a sudden, folks, you've got a militarized state here. It's not just the police anymore. Now it's the military, and potentially against the civilian population. Now, you may say, that's cool. As long as you're not breaking the law, they ain't got nothing to worry about. Well, that's fine until it's you. Until all of a sudden a situation or policy that you hold dear is now being outlawed, or something else that you consider illegal, and you start to protest against it. And now all of a sudden they turn against you. Or consider that especially if you're a conservative and you're cheering Trump on all this, well, guess what? In 3.5 years, it's going to be somebody else in that White House. But now the standard is set that you can use the military, the physical uniformed military in American cities, to keep order. Now, what if their order is different than the one that you like? Now it's you who's protesting, but now then they're going to be beating you up. Do you see what I'm saying here? You can't start something like this and then think you can control it because you're cheering it on because the victims today, or the recipients, maybe a better word, is somebody you don't like or doing something you don't like. But once you now make this normalized, it becomes more and more pervasive. And suddenly one day you're the one that it's turned against. That's the problem. You just can't go down this road because it can't be controlled. When you start putting that kind of power in individuals' hands and you make it normalized here, it's too easy to use against somebody else. That's the danger of militarizing the police in the United States. And one of the things I'm concerned about. Wanted to let you know about that too. Appreciate you guys. This is more of a domestic issue today, but it has something to do with the military stuff, so we thought we'd bring it to you and just share some thoughts. Thank you very much. We'll see you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.